Hello YouTube, this is Let's Talk Horror and welcome back to another video. Okay guys, so it is the month of October. It is the spooky month. It is our month as horror fans. And obviously I've been thinking about, okay, what can I do? What can I release? What can I talk about here to really celebrate the spooky month? You know, what can I bring you? I thought about doing a Halloween franchise review, most notably, but then I thought, look, maybe that's better saved for when we get this TV show. We're going to get this TV show in 2025 or 2026, maybe at the latest. We're going to get this TV show in 2025 or 2026 at the latest. So maybe it's better saved for the build up to that when we eventually get that. It didn't feel right doing a Friday the 13th movie series review. So I thought, look, why not just go completely out there? And I found out that Terror Train, you know, another movie that came out during the slasher craze of the 1980s, and now it has 2 sequels on Tubi. For those who don't know, those are Tubi originals. Why not do something like, you know, why not review that, give this little 80s B-movie slasher the spotlight for a little while? You know, maybe I can recommend it for people that are, you know, looking for something different. And so I decided to do Terror Train. I'm going to review the original 1980s version, and then I'm going to review the 2 Tubi original movies that both came out within months of each other, actually, in 2022. You know, Terror Train 1980, that's what we're going to be talking about here today. This is obviously one of the fairly big roles that Jamie Lee Curtis is remembered for during the slasher craze in the 1980s. Obviously, she did Halloween and Halloween 2. She did Prom Night, she did The Fog, and she did Terror Train. And even compared with Prom Night, this one seems to be kind of an afterthought to many people, but I decided to check it out, and I am happy to say that, look, I actually walked away having a decent time with this one. I actually walked away feeling I could recommend this to people if they know what it is. And look, it's not a masterpiece. I want you to know that right away. If you're going into this, do not expect like a cinematic masterpiece or anything close to it. But you know what? For an 80s schlocky B-movie slasher, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. So with that, I'm going to read the synopsis, and then I'm going to get into what I liked and what I didn't like. So let's get right into it. Okay, so here's the synopsis for Terror Train 1980. During a hazing, a fraternity of pre-med students has a particularly sinister prank in store for one of their more timid pledges, played by Derek McKinnon. With the help of a co-aide, Elena Maxwell, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, they pull off the prank so well that the pledge needs to be institutionalized as a result. After several years pass and people forget the incident, those involved with the prank are ready to celebrate the graduation by having a costume party on a train, but they haven't escaped their past. And that is the synopsis for Terror Train 1980. So if that sounds interesting, again, the movie is on Tubi right now. Tubi is free, so if you want to go check it out, come back here, see if you agree with my thoughts on the film. So what did I like? And let's jump right into that. So the first positive is I think the train setting is a pretty unique and well-utilized setting. You know, I think that's just really interesting that here we have this, you have all this movement of a train, like you're on and in this setting that is moving very fast and in some ways is dangerous, but you have very few places to go. It's a very cramped space. You're in there with a lot of people. So while it's always moving, you have this claustrophobic setting. And I just thought it was very unique and very different. And that's really what this movie is banking on. You know, the movie is called Terror Train after all. And I just like the switch up from just the typical Friday the 13th like setting at a camp, or Evil Dead setting like in a cabin in the woods, or Halloween setting like a suburban neighborhood. You know, we've seen those concepts. As much as I love those concepts, we've seen those concepts done to death. The setting is what truly helps this movie stand out. And I do think it is fairly well utilized. Again, that they do a good job of building up and showing off this cramped space. They do a pretty decent job of making it atmospheric, so I liked it a lot. On top of that, the movie, for what it is fairly well directed. As I said, they do a pretty good job showing off the confined space of the train. If you want to know, I believe his name is Roger Spottiswoode is who directed this movie, and I can check on that real quick. And yes, Roger Spottiswoode directed this movie. And I think he did a decent job showing off the confined space, building up the tension, making this train pretty fairly atmospheric, and I think he did a good job. So fairly well directed. Jamie Lee Curtis's performance, probably the main thing people know this movie for, is another strong one. It really carries this film, especially when we get to the last 25 to 35 minutes of the movie where everything goes to shit and she's having her showdown with the killer. She really carries this movie, and she's much needed because her character is one of the most interesting characters and probably the one we are invested in the most. The other characters in this movie are kind of typical slasher characters to a certain extent, but Jamie Lee Curtis's performance and her character is fairly strong. The exploration of illusion, that's probably the main theme throughout this movie from the beginning, is what is an illusion and what is reality. I thought that was done pretty well. I thought that exploration was done pretty well throughout this movie. I think it did a good job, and the whole like magic show did a good job of keeping you invested and keeping you entertained during the slower parts of the movie. And it obviously plays a big role in the reveal of the killer. So I thought that exploration of illusion was pretty well done and pretty interesting. And then on top of that, I would say the movie is pretty well paced. You know, as I said, and as has been talked about with this movie a lot, they wanted to make Halloween on a Train. The inspiration for this was Halloween on a Train. And I do think the pacing fits that kind of formula. I'm not saying this movie is anywhere near the quality of Halloween. It's not. Trust me, it's not. But I do think the pacing fits that formula fairly well. The first 45 minutes to an hour of the movie is kind of a slower burn. It's letting the confined environment sink in. It's letting the tension and kind of build. And then it's the last 25 or 35 minutes of the movie where everything kind of goes to shit and the reveals happen and Jamie Lee Curtis has her showdown with the killer. I think it is fairly well paced, and I enjoyed that pacing, and I think it fit the formula well. So all in all, yeah, I think this movie does a lot well for what it's going for. Okay, but here's what I didn't like, and trust me, for as much as I said that I did like, and I did have a decent amount of positives to say about this movie, here's what I didn't like. First of all, what this movie really needs is a better soundtrack. This soundtrack is somewhat generic. I will say that. And, a soundtrack can be important. I don't think Halloween, because again, and I'm mentioning Halloween a lot, not only because of Jamie Lee Curtis, but as I've said, they were setting out to make Halloween on a Train. Halloween would not have been the movie it was without that iconic soundtrack. Friday the 13th would not have been the movie in the franchise it was without that iconic soundtrack. So an iconic soundtrack can really elevate the movie, and this one is fairly generic. My second negative is the killer is not all that frightening. Now, I will say this. What makes this killer unique is that he does not have one set masked look like a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees. He has multiple looks throughout the movie. He has multiple, costumes and multiple masks. I mean, that kind of makes him pretty unique and memorable and stuff like that. But none of these looks are all that frightening. Probably the most notable is the Groucho Marx look, and I've actually heard some people say they like this look a lot. When I was doing research online, I saw a good number of people praising that look. I don't. To me, it looks silly. It's not scary at all. So I didn't care for that. And then we have the lizard look. Again, not really scary at all. That's the look he switches into after his first kill. Not scary at all. We have the bird look that we never actually see him fully in. And then actually, I think the scariest look, the look that got to me, was kind of the old man. I think some people labeled it the monk look during the climax of the movie in his showdown with Jamie Lee Curtis. That one's decent. That one's actually probably the scariest. That is the one I prefer. But all in all, this killer is not all that intimidating, is not all that frightening. This is a pretty bland, forgettable slasher villain. And to go on at the twist is somewhat predictable. They kind of try to build this up as a whodunit. There are definitely whodunit elements, but you know right from the beginning, right when you see that this is a revenge story, you know this is going to be Kenny. Right from the first kill of the movie, Kenny, the co-ed that got, hazed. It never veers off that. Again, they try to have some semblance of a whodunit, but it's very predictable from the beginning who this is going to be. And really, the setup itself is generic. This revenge story, this hazing prank gone wrong, that was a pretty generic setup from the beginning. And then while the twist they add to the reveal, I guess, is interesting, and the way they reveal the killer is interesting, and Derek McKinnon's performance as Kenny late in this movie is outstanding, but from the beginning, the whole whodunit aspect of Kenny, it's pretty predictable. Also, the ending, to me, while it's cool to see him, kind of freaking out and falling off the train, spoiler alert, it is fairly abrupt. It is a pretty abrupt ending. There's no real, resolution, and that's, I guess, kind of a problem with a lot of these slasher movies from the 80s, is these movies just kind of stop. There's no, real ending. If you don't know, Jamie Lee Curtis's character kisses Kenny. He starts freaking out. One of the conductors comes in and boots him off the train. He falls off the tracks and clearly dies, and then the movie just stops. There's no real resolution or ending to what happened. So not the best ending either. And then to me, the kills, the carnage candy, as someone like Cody Leach would say, I didn't think it was great. In fact, it's pretty damn tame by today's standards. So the one kill that I thought was pretty excellent was the decapitation, and it's a cutaway kill where we appear to see this guy get his throat slit, and then somebody stumbles on, his severed head in a later scene. And I thought the effects in that reveal were pretty great. All in all, the carnage candy isn't that great, but still, I would recommend this. If you know what you're getting into, it's cheesy, it's schlocky, it's a B-movie slasher, but hey, if you're into that like I am, you want to see an underrated Jamie Lee Curtis performance and you want to see a unique slasher setting, maybe this is it for you. All in all, I would give this one a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. And by the way, this is a New Year's Eve holiday slasher technically. Yeah, if you were looking for a New Year's Eve horror movie to ring in the new year, this is it for you. There's enough here to where I can recommend it, even with its flaws. So 6.5, or I'm going to say it's 7 out of 10. We'll give this a solid 7 out of 10 for what this is. So that's going to do it for me today, guys. That is my review of Terror Train. Let me know what you think in the comments, and be on the lookout for the two to-be original movies, the reboot and the sequel, because I plan on reviewing those as well. And I will see you guys later. Take care.